Camera speeds. Kurt Wright, take one, mark it.
My name is Ronald Curtright. I go by RC. That's what my friends call me. 6 months ago, I was a ministerial servant and an active Jehovah's Witness, and I realized that what I had been raised to believe was a lie. And 2 months ago, I disassociated myself. I've always had a very scientific mind. I always liked nature and wanting to know how things work. And in fact, when I eventually woke up to things and talked to my family about it, my mom kind of made the off comment that she thought this was coming since I was 7. Because when I was 7 years old, I asked my mom to prove to me that God was real. But basically, you know, being raised a witness, you kind of realize when you ask those kinds of questions, it upsets people. And as a kid, you really want to make people happy. At least I did. And I think that's what helped the indoctrination to take hold, so that I trained myself to basically, I trained myself so that if I had questions I couldn't answer, I would just kind of put it in the back of my head and wait on Jehovah, and I wouldn't think about it anymore. If I couldn't find the answer, I won't think about it. I'll just wait on Jehovah. You know, the internet came along, and I love reading about science, and I really began to get the impression that there were things about specifically evolution that were not being honestly discussed in the literature from the Watchtower organization. But again, I put that in the back of my mind and I tried to not think about it. And I guess the very last point was when I heard Leah Remini get interviewed. The interviewer asked Leah Remini, why don't Scientologists just go on Google? They would see all this stuff and they would leave Scientology. And she said they're not allowed to read about Scientology on the internet. They're not allowed to read anything that's, you know, contradicting the teachings of Scientology. And it clicked in my brain. I said, that's what I do. If I read anything that contradicts the Watchtower, I stop reading it. I close the browser tab and I move on. And it just clicked that this religious group had the same way of controlling information that I had been brought up with. And I went home and I told my wife something's not right and we need to do some research. And we need to not feel guilty about looking outside of the Watchtower publications for the answers, because I'm no longer convinced that they're being entirely honest with me. So if I was to get real specific, I still had guilt about doing the research, and I didn't want to go full apostate. I didn't want to look at apostate material. And I was afraid about getting tricked by scientists, because we're taught that the scientists are basically deceived by Satan. We have that Origin of Life brochure, and it has all these quotes from scientists, and it has the source of the quotes in the back. So that was the first thing I did, is I started looking up those quotes, finding the source material, because I thought surely that's not apostate, it's in the brochure. And I started to realize how they had quote mined and taken those things and twisted what the scientists were saying to try and prove their point. And I lost faith that the organization was being honest with me. At that point, once I had lost that faith that I could trust them to be honest with me in the literature, I started looking at other things. I learned about carbon dating. I learned about things related to the flood, so that I could then compare that to what it said in the Insight book, and then go back and read more of what was on the web about the flood, and then read more in the Insight book, and just start comparing all these different things back and forth. And within a couple of days, I was convinced that none of it was true, that what I was raised to believe was a lie. I understood things like critical thinking, confirmation bias, and you need to look at all sources of information and try to not narrow your focus. And I would apply that to any other thing I wanted to learn, but I never applied it in the organization. And so hearing somebody explain how in their religion they weren't allowed to criticize their religion, if they found something that contradicted their religion, they were supposed to stop reading it. It made me realize that this was like some sort of a control tactic that was common across various different religions to try and keep people from reading dissenting opinions. And so it just clicked. I thought, well, this is not some special witness thing. This is a cult thing. This is a Scientology thing. This is a Mormon thing. You know, these other groups are probably all doing the same. And that's how they keep you from finding anything that contradicts what they believe. You'll just immediately stop reading it. The truth, not the truth, you know, not the Jehovah's Witness truth, but the actual truth, like actual facts. They can't be so fragile that you read something on a website and now your mind is broken and you're just tricked and you can't get out of it and learn that you were wrong. It can't be that fragile. The facts aren't fragile. So what could possibly be the harm of doing some research? You don't have to agree with the research. You could read it, and then you could read what it says in the Watchtower and end up still agreeing with the Watchtower if it makes more sense. So why not go read the other research, compare it to the Watchtower? I had never done that. But at some point, it clicked that the truth cannot be that fragile. Facts cannot be that fragile. There must be a way to look at these other sources of information to vet what the Watchtower is saying without being tricked.